I genuinely believed that after 39 years of sharing a bed, a mortgage, and a life, there were no surprises left. I was wrong. The surprise came on a Tuesday evening, amidst the clatter of silverware and the smell of roasted chicken. Celine placed her fork down, wiped the corners of her mouth with a napkin, and looked everywhere but at me. Then came the words that would sever the timeline of my life into before and after. She told me, her voice trembling slightly, that it would be better if I didn't join the family at the lake house for the holidays this year. I felt a cold sensation spread through my chest, distinct and sharp. I asked her to repeat herself, thinking perhaps my hearing was finally failing me, as she often claimed. She didn't retreat. She told me the children, specifically our daughter Josephine, felt everyone would be more comfortable if I stayed behind in the city. She used the word abrasive. She said I had become impossible to be around. Before I tell you how a man recovers from being exiled by his own blood, take a moment to look at your own life. We all have moments where the ground falls out beneath us. If you are listening to this, I invite you to join our community here. Click the like button if you've ever felt cast aside, share this with someone who needs to hear the truth, and tell me in the comments, where in the world are you watching from? Don't forget to subscribe. We are building something real here, and I want you to be part of it. Abrasive. The word floated above the dinner table, toxic and heavy. I asked her to elaborate, though part of me didn't want to know. Celine adopted that tone she had perfected over the last 18 months, a tone reserved for toddlers and the senile. She reminded me of the barbecue in July, where I questioned Josephine's investment strategy. She brought up the incident at my nephew's wedding, where I apparently insulted the groom by asking about his career stability. Josephine was our eldest, 39 years old, a woman who worked in high-end event planning. She was brilliant but flighty, always chasing the next trend. I hadn't insulted her. I had tried to have a conversation. She had wanted to liquidate her retirement savings to buy digital land in the metaverse. I had called it a gamble. Celine called it crushing her spirit. They said everyone was tired of walking on glass around me. They wanted a holiday without lectures, without judgment, and without me. I looked at Celine, really looked at her. Her hair was grayer now, cut short in a style her friends all seemed to share. We had met in a library in Leeds, decades ago. We had survived recessions, the raising of 2 children, and the slow erosion of youth. I had spent 40 years as a logistics systems engineer. My job was to see the bottlenecks, the potential failures, the weak points in a supply chain before they snapped. It was a skill that made me excellent at my career and, apparently, unbearable as a father and husband. I asked if this was a permanent banishment. Celine reached for my hand, but stopped halfway, pulling back as if she touched a hot stove. She promised it was just for this season, just a cooling-off period. She suggested I could visit my sister in Glasgow. I haven't spoken to my sister in 6 years. I simply nodded. That night, the silence in our bedroom was deafening. I lay there realizing that the family unit I had dedicated my existence to was surgically removing me to save the host body. The following morning, the house was empty. Celine had gone to her Pilates class, leaving a sticky note on the espresso machine that read, "Space is good for everyone." I crushed the note and threw it in the bin. For the first time in years, I didn't turn on the television or read the paper. Instead, I went to the garage. Over the last decade, the main house had become a showroom for Celine's beige aesthetic. But the detached garage was mine. It smelled of oil, sawdust, and cold concrete. It was cluttered, chaotic to the untrained eye, but perfect to me. This was where I had been hiding. My family assumed I was out there fixing toasters or whittling birds, just an old man passing time until the end. They were wrong. I had been building the future. It began casually enough 7 months prior. I had bumped into an old associate, Silas O'Malley, at a tedious industry wake. Silas was still in the game, consulting for major freight companies. He was complaining about the global shipping crisis, about how millions were lost because container ships, trucking fleets, and warehouse inventories couldn't talk to each other efficiently. He said the industry needed a translator, a universal brain. He spoke about it as a pipe dream. I went home and couldn't sleep. I knew how to fix it. I had written the precursor to such a code in the late 90s for a regional rail network, but the technology hadn't been ready to scale. Now, with cloud computing and AI, it was possible. So, I started coding. I learned new languages. I studied neural networks. I sat in this freezing garage while my family mocked my tinkering. Sometimes, the isolation feels heavy, doesn't it? You give everything to people who don't notice, and you wonder if you matter at all. If you are feeling that weight right now, if you are working in the dark while the world ignores you, just hit that subscribe button, not for the algorithm, but as a promise to yourself that you are still here, still fighting, and that you refuse to be invisible. Let's walk this path together. By early December, I had a working prototype. It wasn't pretty, the interface was bare bones, but the engine underneath was humming. I ran simulations using historical data from the port of Dover. The efficiency jump wasn't just good, it was staggering. My algorithm, which I named Nexus, predicted delays 3 days before they happened and rerouted supply chains autonomously. I invited Silas for a pint at a pub halfway between our homes. I opened my laptop on the sticky wooden table. "Remember that problem you mentioned?" I asked. Silas squinted at the screen. He watched the simulation run for 10 minutes. He didn't drink his beer. When he finally looked up, his face was pale. "Watkins," he whispered, "do you have any idea what you've done?" I told him I did. I had solved the bottleneck. Silas moved with a speed I didn't think he possessed. Within a week, he had set up a meeting with a consortium of investors from a firm called Blue Horizon Logistics based in Zurich. We met on Zoom. I expected skepticism. I was a retiree in a cardigan, not a hoodie-wearing prodigy from Silicon Valley. But the math didn't care about my age. They grilled me for hours. They threw every scenario at the Nexus system: strikes, weather events, fuel shortages. The system adapted every time. They didn't just want to license it. They wanted to own the IP. They wanted to buy me out completely. The figure they put on the table was £12 million, a lump sum with a retained consultancy role for 2 years. I signed the preliminary papers 3 days before Celine told me I was uninvited from Christmas. The final closure of the deal was scheduled for January 2nd, the first business day of the new year. I hadn't told a soul. Not Celine, not Josephine. Why would I? I was just the difficult old man. I was the relic who didn't understand how the modern world worked. If I had told them, they would have thought I was being scammed. Or worse, they would have suddenly found a reason to invite me to the lake house after all. That thought made me sick. So I kept my mouth shut. I watched Celine pack her bags. She took the premium wine I had bought. She kissed me on the cheek with the affection one gives a distant relative and drove away. Christmas Eve was strange. I expected to feel angry, to be pacing the floors and cursing their names. Instead, there was a profound quiet. I ordered Indian takeaway, and ate it straight from the cartons while watching an old black and white movie. The house was decorated. Celine had insisted on the tree and the garlands before she left. But without the performative joy of the family, the decorations felt like a set for a play that had been canceled. I realized something terrifying and liberating. I was fine. I didn't need their validation to breathe. For years, their dismissals had chipped away at me, making me feel small. But sitting there, knowing what I had built in the garage, knowing what was coming in January, I felt 10 feet tall. I slept better that night than I had in decades. The holidays passed in a blur of solitude and work. I spent hours refining the user interface for the Blue Horizon team. I was preparing for the handover. Then came the morning of January 2nd. The deal was countersigned digitally at 9:00 a.m. Zurich time. That was 8:00 a.m. for me. The wire transfer hit my account an hour later. But the press release was embargoed until 1:00 a.m. the following morning to align with Asian markets opening. I stayed up. I sat in the dark living room, the glow of my tablet illuminating my face. At exactly 1:00 a.m., the notification popped up on the business news ticker. British engineer revolutionizes supply chain. Blue Horizon acquires Nexus algorithm for £12 million. There was my name, Watkins. Not dad, not husband, but Watkins, the engineer. I poured myself a scotch and waited. It didn't take long. The world is connected now. News travels faster than light. At 1:14 a.m., my phone buzzed on the coffee table. It was Josephine. I let it ring. It stopped, then started again immediately. I picked it up on the third attempt. "Dad?" Her voice was high, laced with a panic I rarely heard. She sounded like she was hyperventilating. "Dad, are you awake?" "I am," I said calmly. "It's late, Josephine." "Dad, someone sent me a link. It's all over the finance feeds. It says you sold a company. It says, Dad, it says £12 million. Is this a joke? Is this a mistake?" "It's not a mistake," I said. "It's accurate." "But how?" she stammered. You've just been in the garage. Mom said you were just depressed. You were fixing radios." "I wasn't fixing radios," I said. "I was fixing the global supply chain." There was a silence on the other end so profound, I thought the call had dropped. Then I heard her turn away from the phone and yell for her mother. "Mom, wake up. You need to see this." "I have to go, Josephine," I said. "I have work to do in the morning." I hung up. I turned the phone off. I knew what was coming. A tsunami of regret disguised as concern. I didn't turn my phone back on for 2 days. I communicated with the Blue Horizon team via email on my secure laptop. When I finally powered the device up, it nearly vibrated off the table. 50 texts. 20 voicemails. Emails from cousins I hadn't seen since the 90s. Journalists asking for comments. Celine arrived home 3 days early. I heard her key in the lock. She didn't call out hello like she usually did. She walked into the living room where I was reading a book. She looked pale, shaken. She was wearing her expensive winter coat. But she looked small inside it. "Watkins," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "Why didn't you tell me?" "You didn't ask," I replied, not looking up from my page. "You were too busy explaining why I wasn't welcome at Christmas." "That's not fair," she snapped, finding a bit of her old fire. "We are married. You kept a fortune from me." I closed the book and stood up. "I kept a part of myself from you because you made it clear you weren't interested in me. You were interested in a version of me that kept quiet and paid the bills. When I tried to speak, I was difficult. When I tried to share ideas, I was embarrassing. Why would I share my life's work with people who think I'm obsolete? She sat down heavily on the sofa, as if her legs had given out. We didn't think you were obsolete. We just thought... You thought I was done, I finished for her. You thought the best of me was in the past. You were wrong. We sat in silence for a long time. The power dynamic in the room had shifted so violently, it made the air feel thin. What happens now? She asked, tears forming in her eyes. Are you leaving? Is that what this is? I don't know, I admitted, and that was the truth. I have a consultancy contract. I have an office in the city now. I have a life that has restarted. Can we fix this? She asked. Do you want to fix us, Celine? Or do you want to secure your proximity to the money? She flinched as if I'd slapped her. That's cruel. It's a valid question, I said, given that a week ago, I wasn't good enough to eat turkey with. Josephine drove down the next day. She didn't have her usual air of superiority. She looked like a child who had broken a window. She stood in the hallway, twisting her gloves in her hands. I'm sorry, Dad, she said. For what? I asked. For everything. For the things I said. For not seeing you. Josephine, I said, leaning against the doorframe. You saw me. You just didn't respect what you saw. You thought because I didn't understand your metaverse investments, that I was stupid. You confused wisdom with senility. I know, she cried. I was an idiot, a judgmental idiot. Please, can we just start over? I didn't hug her. Not yet. We can't start over, I told them both. We can't erase the last few years. I'm not going to pretend the exclusion didn't happen just because the bank balance has changed. I set the terms. I told them I was going to focus on my work. I would be traveling to Zurich and Singapore. I wasn't going to be the handyman husband or the ATM father. If they wanted a relationship with me, they had to get to know Watkins, the engineer, not just the role they had cast me in. They agreed. They had no choice, really. But beyond the money, I think they were genuinely shocked into seeing me for the first time in forever. Months passed. The dynamic was awkward, stiff, but real. I was busy. The Nexus integration was challenging, and I loved every minute of it. In April, Josephine came to me with a folder. She looked nervous. I know you hate my business ideas, she started. I don't hate them, I corrected. I hate ill-conceived gambling. She opened the folder. It was a proposal for using the Nexus logic for disaster relief logistics, getting food and medicine to crisis zones efficiently. She had done the research. It was solid. It was meaningful. This, I said, pointing to the page. This is real work, Josephine. This I can respect. We started working on it together. I saw her sharp mind applied to something tangible, and she saw my experience as an asset, not a hindrance. By the time the next holiday season rolled around, the world was different. We were at the lake house. The snow was falling thick and heavy outside. Inside, the fire was roaring. Josephine was there with her new fiancé, a quiet man who was an architect. Celine was in the kitchen, but she wasn't manic. She seemed calmer, more grounded. I stood by the window, holding a glass of wine, looking out at the frozen lake. I heard them laughing in the other room. It wasn't the polite laughter of people tolerating each other. It was genuine. They had invited me, of course. But more importantly, I had decided to come, not out of obligation, but because I finally felt like I was standing on equal footing. I walked out onto the deck, the cold air biting at my face. I looked at my reflection in the dark glass of the sliding door. I was older, yes. My face was lined. but the eyes looking back were sharp. They were alive. The victory wasn't the 12 million pounds. The money was just a tool, a scorecard. The victory was that I had reclaimed my own narrative. I had refused to let the world, or even the people I loved, tell me I was finished. As I stood there, my phone buzzed with an update from the Zurich team. The disaster relief pilot was greenlit. I smiled. Listen to me closely. We live in a world that loves to discard people. It tells you that once you reach a certain age, or fail a certain number of times, you are done. It is a lie. If you are hearing my voice, you have something left to give. Do not let them silence you. Do not let them write you out of the script. Subscribe to this channel right now, not for me, but as a declaration that you are still in the game. You are still building, and you are far from finished.